Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, welcome. So, today we have a really exciting workshop to talk about and actually to do some experiential work with as well. So this is an ongoing workshop in our series, The Edge in Education. And our theme throughout the year is authentic learning, and learning that is likely to matter in the lives that learners are likely to live. And last time we talked about service learning, and we talked about how that's connected to the mission of the school and connected to an authentic global education. And today we're going to be talking about design thinking. And this is a big movement that's happening around the world, not only in education, but many other places. And that's a very bad picture I took this morning of the beginning of the robotics competition at ISP. We're hosting 13 schools from throughout the region, and you're going to have an opportunity to go over there later and actually see what's going on. It's quite exciting. You'll notice there's looks like a little boxing ring in the middle. And the students work in teams, and they're actually programming robots to do different kinds of activities, very much connected to this whole topic of design thinking. So, as always, when we talk about various things we do in the school, we're always talking about our mission. And I just wanted to spend a few minutes with you talking about how that's connected to the larger world in design thinking. Here you have blurbs from two major powerhouse universities, MIT and Stanford University in the States. And that's two of many major universities that are moving in the direction and have actively been involved in design thinking in a whole variety of different ways. And that is a reflection of what's happening in the world. So we see it in universities, and you're going to see it in schools, and at ISP we're also working towards building that kind of thinking, hands-on work at ISP. And what's, as I said, very neat is we've got the robotics competition happening right now, so it's a very timely topic for us. So here's a few blurbs from the Stanford University, what's it called? The D School. And some of the things that they say about design thinking. Just wanted to show how it's connected to our mission. Can you read that? I asked the wrong person. I'll read it. In a time when there is a hunger for innovation everywhere, we think our primary responsibility is to help prepare a generation of students to rise with the challenges of our times. And that's very much linked to what we talk about as the sort of overarching objective of the mission of the school, that we're preparing students to adapt and contribute responsibly to our changing world. They also talk about real-world problems and constraints and commitments accelerate learning more than hypothetical classroom activities or exercises. And again, we've had conversations about experiential learning, hands-on learning, very much linked to what we call an authentic global education. And then finally, just kind of an overarching statement about design thinking. It draws on methods from engineering and design and combines them with ideas from the arts, tools from the social sciences, and insights from the business world. And that's very much connected to all of these competencies that we think are crucial for 21st century learners. It's not enough anymore to have the 3 R's, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic. Kids need to go into the world with a whole set of skills that these are connected to. So just to show the connection between this particular program and many of the things that we do at ISP. And finally, this is what they call their manifesto, the D Manifesto on a napkin. Everything you need to know about them on a napkin. And again, you'll see a lot of similarities between what they talk about as what's important about design thinking and what we're trying to do at ISP, about innovation, about collaboration, and about this hands-on project work that we do at ISP. So I think it's important to understand that when we talk about a lot of these things, these are trends in the world, and they reflect the changes in the world. It's not only our little bubble. And with that, I'll turn it over to Teresa.
And I think just to reiterate, always the purpose of this group is to kind of look at the edge, right? What's out there, what's trending. It's not necessarily that we have it fully figured out and embedded at ISP. We just wanted that disclaimer at the beginning. That these are things, though, that we are playing around with, exploring, because we do want to make sure that we're keeping up with trends that are research-based and that really align to our mission. So these are some, oh, sorry. Another injustice of the world. Females. I have to, sorry, it's this whole thing. I have two robotics competitors staying at our house. They're two girls, and they're from two different schools because they are the only girls on their teams. So they could, because usually they put kids from the same school together. And so last night we were talking a lot about girl power and why aren't there more girls involved in robotics and engineering and whatnot. And so they have some interesting thoughts and concepts. The one was telling me, well, I was in 8th grade and they were going around and asking the boys if they wanted to be in robotics club. And she says, well, what about me? Can I do it? And I said, yeah, we still have some work to do. It's hard to believe we're in 2015. We still have some work to do. So Hefe gets that thing and I get this. No.
Clearly next time she gets this. Now that I've been publicly shamed.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so some things that are obviously taken off at the school level, not only at the university level. There's a lot of tinkering going on. And tinkering is more playing around with things, figuring it out, taking things apart, trying to fix things, do-it-yourself sort of approach. That hands-on figuring things out, how things work, and putting them back together, putting them together in new ways and different ways. Inventing to learn. There's a lot of schools having kids involved in making inventions. And I'm just going to whip back to an earlier slide that was connected to the service learning, because I think this is a big change more recently that's happened. If I can get there. Easier said than done. In the design thinking, this is a typical design thinking cycle. And if you notice, one thing that's probably that wasn't there historically, because some of this has been happening for a long, long time. What's very new is that first step about empathizing. And really, and that's Stanford is really, really pushing that we need to contribute by figuring out what are the needs of other people, what are the needs of schools, what are the needs of the world, and then designing to meet those needs. And so they have a whole big part about empathy. And I really like that. So it's not just inventing to make money. It's not just inventing because I want to do this. But it's really figuring out needs to help and to contribute. And that's why I think there's a nice connection to service learning we talked about last time. And there's a lot of connections to what we're really after here at ISP. It's not just about making and inventing, but for a real authentic purpose to contribute to others. So many schools are having kids involved in that design thinking cycle to try to invent, to contribute to something, to help somebody, themselves, their community, their family. As I click through all these fancy slides. So invent to learn. We actually have an invention unit happening in 4th grade, and some people will be talking about that today. And making, there's a big makers movement around the world. And some of our colleagues are going to talk about that in a little bit. But it's really a collaborative venture that's happening in cities around the world where we're getting together and sharing technology in machines, big heavy machines or 3D printers. So sharing the cost and sharing expertise. It's a fascinating grassroots evolution that's happening around the world. And now we're seeing junior maker centers and maker centers in schools happening, just really bubbling up around the world. Again, because we're seeing the power and the engagement of kids. And we talked about last year in this Edge in Education, motivational theory and what we need to engage kids. Also learning by doing, experiential learning. They're learning a lot more math and science, physics, by doing some of these things than just learning in the more traditional way. So those are some of the things that are happening in many, many schools around the world. So as always, we try to, in learning, help make connections for yourself. So stop and think, what making, tinkering, inventing experiences have you had? And they can be anything. We were comparing at lunch yesterday, knitting. That is because I had this experience in 4-H growing up, that I went to this class on knitting, and I wasn't a great knitter. And the lady got so frustrated with me, she ended up knitting the whole thing for me, and I got a blue ribbon. Kind of defeated the purpose. Because that is part of the thing, is needing to struggle and fail and learning from failures. And that's going to be a big theme. You'll hear it from the teachers. You'll hear it from the robotics competitors today. It's very, very important to struggle and to stick to something. And that's what the research is always showing. It's the most successful people in the future are those who can stick with something, who can take risks and fail. And so so think about yourself. When you've tried to make something, when you've tried to fix something. I don't know about you, at home you get things that just sit there that are not working. Have you ever had those experiences? What did you learn from those experiences? about yourself, about what this process involves? Or what other tinkers or makers do you know? Do you know people who always can fix anything or just are always inventing something else? And what do you notice about them? What kind of skills do they have? What kind of dispositions do they have as a person? Okay? So just think about that and then turn and chat with someone next to you about those 3 questions. Thanks. Okay, because we have some teachers here and we want to get on to their sharing, let's just quickly go around. Anybody have some tinkering or making or inventing experiences themselves that they would be willing to share? Bogdan?
Well, I was just sharing some of my crazy experiments at home, and I was actually in middle school, and I was telling them about a power pack my father made for me, but he was working on a night shift, so he got home early in the morning, he was tired, he gave me the power pack, and he went to bed. But I didn't know which one was the plus sign, which one was the positive sign for the power pack. So in my mind I said, well, the only way I can find out is to make the electrolysis of water. What happens is you split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and hydrogen explodes. So by figuring out on which side it would explode, I would know where's the plus and where's the minus. So, but for that I needed a whole electrolysis device. So I started using pickle jars and syringes and wires and taking batteries apart and everything. And yeah, my mom wasn't very happy when she heard the sound, but I'm safe. But I did make the whole electrolysis device. I did find out which was the plus, which was the minus. So this was just one of the many crazy things. Well, it was very, very technical in terms of chemistry and content because I was really passionate about chemistry and just using materials because I couldn't get an electrolysis device at home, which was very expensive. You could order it for a lab and so on. So also trying to use various materials, like materials you have around your house to build lab materials, basically like lab devices. And that's something which I took also in the my teaching experience, because I always try to use materials that are available for actually building things, like making cell models out of edible materials and then eating the cells after we present them or things like that. And I think this is a really important skill for the students to see what they have at their disposal and how they can use it. Because otherwise, if you just get stuck on, as you were mentioning also, I need to call the technician because I don't know what to do, when there might be a really easy solution right next door in your own flat. So also thinking about all the other materials. And thinkers or makers or inventors, I will just mention somebody who is really dear to me. Her name is Stefania, and she started a project called Hackademia, and she's traveling all over the world having exactly tinkering and hacking workshops. So maybe she'll be here at some point one day in the future. Who knows? Thank you.
Else want to share either their own or somebody they knew, tinkered or made or invented?
I was just saying my father, who was a physicist, but he would fix absolutely everything and anything. I mean, we never ever had a handyman in the house, but yeah, he would spend, he loved trying to figure things out. And so he was really in the process, in the moment, doing it, and that's where he was at his most natural. And so I think he really persevered, and he had a positive outlook on the outcome of whatever he was doing, I suppose. He thought eventually he'll figure it out.
And so perseverance, he just stuck to it until he figured it out. So he's very determined as well. Positive mindset about the whole thing. I could do it. Exactly. Okay, cool. Other people want to share?
My grandfather did not finish high school. He left, I think, early middle school, but he was an auto repairman. That's the job he created, and he was really well respected in our community because he could just sit there and figure that out. And he taught his sons, and they were all really comfortable playing in the car and figuring it out and making it work well. And of course, as cars have changed and technology has changed, it's become so much more complicated to fix anything. That skill kind of disappeared in many ways because now you have to have a computer to diagnose stuff, but they all spent hours and hours playing with cars, rebuilding cars, figuring out how they fit together and what made them work. And it was such a wonderful experience for him and his sons to play with that and figure it all out.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other sharing? Okay, I think we're going to switch up what we had planned to go right to the video. We're going to skip that and come back to that right before we go down to the robotics tournament. And because we have our teachers here, we'd like to have them talk some. So I want, Sheldon is our director of IT here at ISP, and he could just talk about some of his experiences and what he's seen about design thinking in schools around the world.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. I'm going to start with my own experience, actually. I was, a kid similar to Bogdan, and I think I'm the cause of my mother's gray hair. But always taking things apart and seeing what was out there. I was good at math and science, and so I went into engineering in university. And it was fascinating, because coming up through the 70s and 80s, that style of school where you're told something, you memorize it, you're tested on it, and then you go off into a very practical design thinking program. The number of kids who had a really tough time in that first year university because they were expected to find a problem, develop a solution, test it, and apply it in that first year university engineering course, and they had never experienced that before because they were used to the read the book, take the test, and that's it. And we had a spectacular, about a 40% failure rate by third year. The kids just left the program. And they went into other things, the maths and the science, that were still at the time very traditionally read the book, take the test. And so this is, for me, a fantastic movement. Because it's in line with what I believe and what I saw kids struggling with. And so, but the two things that are this design thinking model, it's changed it just a little bit from that first year engineering experience that I had, was the empathy component of it. There was always a problem that was given to you. You weren't really supposed to engage with what other people's problems were. The prof would give you something. This whole idea of looking to the connectedness around and finding an issue, it's the find a need, fill a need sort of model, is really powerful. But also the connectedness of it, the transdisciplinary side of it, the pulling things from all different disciplines, is something that we try to do. It gets a little bit tricky. How do you do that when you've still got a math course and a science course and things like that? So logistically, how do we do that? But that's how the real world works as well. So we've got some interesting tensions there. The other tension that we find with a lot of these things in schools is it's getting a lot harder to tinker in a lot of ways. We have more access to things, cheap tools, 3D printers, laser cutters, all of those sorts of things. But it's a lot harder to take apart a computer these days. Like Jay said, it's a lot harder to get into your car these days. We're an Apple repair center. Most of the Apple stuff is all glued together. How do you get into that to fix it? Whereas before, you take off 6 screws, you're into the computer, and you can fix it. I remember as a kid, our phones breaking in the house, and Dad got out the screwdriver and pulled it apart, and we found the broken wire and fixed it. Now, you can't do that with an iPhone. You can, but you void the warranty, and you're out €1,000. So we've got this really interesting tension, and I'm curious what's going to happen in the future as we start engaging more with the what's possible at the individual level, but balancing that with the business side where we want everything small and light and inaccessible. Where do those meet in the middle? Are we willing to give up some of the convenience factors of a nice small little computer so we can get into it and fix it and adjust it? We see that right now with all of our big desktop computers. It used to be that you could add memory to them and keep them alive a little bit longer. We don't have access to that anymore. So what does that mean if I want to expand stuff in the future? Will that change how I buy things? So there's some fascinating discussions that are coming up, and it's interesting watching the kids, as they start tinkering, deal with some of those. That really big thing there is easy to get into, but this cool thing over there is impossible to get into, and watching their conversations. So we're at a really interesting point with this tinkering model. All right, pass on to the next.
Thank you. And I'm just going to interrupt it before we go on to our school examples. Nathan, who works here in the upper school, Nathan Heilman, you were just thinking about different tinkerers, makers, inventors that you know. And we have one here at ISP in his real life. And so he does things also connected to school here with design thinking and lots of other great learning. But I wanted him to actually talk about this in his life because he lives and breathes it. Besides helping in design tech and whatnot. And then we'll get into design tech here at school, or design thinking. Yeah.
Cool, thanks, good morning. Yeah, let's see. Got into clothing. My mom bought me a sewing machine when I was 15. Very strange thing for a mom of a 15-year-old to do. However, I started to put it to use. I started tinkering and making clothes. So really just like cutting stuff apart that already existed and putting it back together in a way that I thought looked better. But it wasn't really until I got here to Prague that I started thinking about actually a business involved in it. People were like, wow, these are cool. Could you make it for me? We'd buy it. but the number of hours that it took for me to produce something was just like really incredible. It'd be like, that's not really what I'm into, but I could see here there was like trade schools and like professional sewers looking for work. And I was like, okay, well, this could actually sort of fit a business model. So then I started becoming just a designer, not sewing. And now there's like a series of fashion markets that occur like once a month, maybe once every 2 months. And the scene has really grown. And there I sell and find new clients and customers. So I have like a room in my building where I have my studio space now. So like twice a week after school I go home and work a second job. So it's like a semi-professional tinkerer at this point, I guess. But yeah, I think critical to finding my involvement in design was when I was driving my motorcycle across the country. And when I was in San Francisco, my motorcycle broke down. And I didn't have the means to fix it, like professionally buy something, like pay for someone to fix it. But I needed this motorcycle to get to my waitering job. And so I took out the manual and I got some electrical resistance cables and figured out where the problem was according to the manual. And it worked. I bought the part, it completed the circuit, and I couldn't believe it, but I fixed my motorcycle on my own. So this experience didn't happen in elementary school, middle school, high school, or university, but it happened like 2 years after university, out in the real world. I'm like, wow, you can read a manual that's about electronics, not have an engineering degree, and figure out how to fix your own motorcycle. This was like hugely empowering to me. Like, so when I got here and I had a lot of space culturally and personally, I decided I'm gonna like do this business with clothing, teach myself how to build a website. So I taught myself how to program, and now it's like you've got the availability of electronics to like build your own smartphone, for example. So like when you think about the limitations that modern technology brings in, there's a counterculture that's building in, filling in behind that, allowing people to participate in a way that wasn't available before. So,
That's excellent.
thanks.
So again, it's so exciting, right? Because you see it live, and that's what we want to do, is to have that empowerment at a much younger age so that they realize the power of being able to do things yourself and figure things out and stick to it and not wait until after university. And talk to him about his clothing. It's pretty cool. So we want to talk about some design thinking. We talked about the maker movement, tinkering, taking apart robotics engineering. We want to say, what are some things that we're playing around with here or else in other schools that these teachers have been involved with? So we'll start with elementary, and I turned over to Ryan from 4th grade and Damian, our tech coach in the elementary.
All right, so it's a bit of a coincidence that we're having this today, because in the 4th grade this afternoon we're having our Innovation Expo, where the kids, one of the things that the kids have been doing is identifying an object around the school or their home and a problem associated with that object and trying to design a fix for it. So the Innovation Expo is not only to showcase that, but also to get feedback from the people that come and the other classes that come, and hopefully improve on this design. But I'm also a really big believer in having kids make things as much as possible. One of the ways that I've done that in my class is I have class economy, and when I first started teaching, it was very straightforward. Kids had certain jobs around the classroom, and they would get paid for those jobs and fake class money, and then they'd have to pay rent for their chairs, and that's how it worked. It's evolved quite a bit since that initial stage, in that in the first semester, all the jobs that are given they have to do some sort of creating. So they might make a claymation or have a blog or just make something. And then during the second semester, they all get fired and they have to come up with their own jobs. And so then what they're doing is they're making their own products, and it's this idea of testing it and how does it work, because they have to sell it to each other. And if it's not a good product, then they'll find out really fast. So they collect feedback from all their classes, they try it out, they change it, and over the course of the second semester, they realize what works and what doesn't. It doesn't necessarily solve a bigger, wider problem, but it is the problem of economics, and it gives the chance for the kids to create and learn from each other. So that's what I have.
So as Teresa said, I'm the tech coach, and so I do a lot of making online, and so it's interesting now because, like some people talked about, technology can also make it more difficult to access the inner workings of things, but it can also open up opportunity. And now we're looking at new technologies that allow us to make things tactilely, as well as while we're using the iPad or while we're using the computer. And so what Brian did not talk about was some of the other things that he does with making. So for example, with Scratch, which is computer programming online, there are also circuit boards like Makey-Makeys and squishy circuits and other things that you can connect it with so that you're actually doing something in the real world while you're doing something in the virtual world. There are 3 examples shown up here that I can talk about. The first one is the kindergarten bakery. How many of you bought something from kindergarten? I did. And the second one is Karen's Arcade, which the grade 2 participate in. So if you've had a child in grade 2, you've probably seen some of the great things that they make using cardboard, being inspired by Kane's Arcade, which was a video that of a child's project that he made in his dad's garage. And then the third one, I think that's also Kane's Arcade. Yeah. What we're trying to do in elementary, we do a lot of stuff with kids working hands-on. And I'm the IT coach, so that's kind of funny because I'm not a person who says, well, we need to move things towards being more online. In fact, what I do say instead is we need to make sure that we don't lose the hands-on making that we have in our curriculum, even as we add more devices and have more capabilities with technology, with new technology. We're already doing lots of great stuff with children making things. We have them making, in grade 3, you saw them last year outside with posters trying to invite you to be more environmentally conscious. In grade 4, you see many of the things that Ryan's talked about. In grade 5, they do the walk to water, and they learn about how different people in different countries may not have the same access to water that we do. That children in places like Darfur have to walk long distances to collect water in order for use. And children have to come up with ways of exploring the problem, coming up with possible solutions that they can share, things that they may be able to make to solve those problems. So we have a lot of making. The part we're trying to add right now is looking at connecting it to empathy. So either having an action part, how can you serve your world? What can you do that changes the way people experience the world? And so with the kindergarten bakery, that's done very well. The children went last week and this week, and they actually bought products from the grocery store. They went to Albert's, and they thought about what would people who use the food bank need. And they went and they bought those products that they're going to donate to the food bank. So they had many of the components. They thought about what could be a need in our community. We could make baked goods. At the same time, we could also raise funds for people who do not have as much as we do. And the children were really engaged in the whole process. They had to think about who they're going to give the money to, what kinds of things they're going to make, how they're going to set up the classroom for the bakery, what kinds of things they will offer. So if you went to some of the, you could see that each of the kindergarten classrooms had very different setups. Some of them had tables like a cafe with menus, and some of them just had sitting without menus. And that's because it was really student-centered, and it was also student-driven. So there was a lot of brainstorming happening with children in terms of coming up with what are the needs and how can we serve the needs. And I think that's the important part of design thinking that we're trying to do more of. Thank you.
Okay, and now to more girl power in the middle school. Kat and Avis, our math and science leaders in the middle school. We'll talk what's happening in...
slides for me?
Right there. Or I can if you want to, or you can just
Okay.
hit that right button.
The right button. Okay,
Yep.
it's technology. Okay. I'm not sure who put these in. I'm not sure who put these in either, but here's some middle school kids doing some awesome design thinking. There they are. Selected by Arnie. Very good pictures. Well done. I can't speak to those specifically, but obviously there's some robotics. I know that we're a little tight for time, so I will try to be quick because I know you want to get to the next step. Have we taken that slide out? Apparently not. I thought we did. Okay, some of these slides we'll zip through. Here we go. In this slide, we've taken that design sequence and we put it in a circle. Design really is a circular process that keeps going on and on and on. And we've kept this model that Teresa and I think has been touched on a couple times with the empathy component. And we've really embraced that in middle school in grades 6, 7, and 8. We've done various design projects, but this empathy component is new for us. It's tied in a lot with our work with service learning and also our advisory program. So, Kat, should I press play? I don't know how to press play.
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about Rube Goldberg. It was done a little bit in...
this stick.
Really? Really? I'll talk a little bit about the Rube Goldberg project that the grade 7s have done over the past couple of years. And it was interesting to see Kane's Arcade come up because when we realized that grade 2 was doing Kane's Arcade at the same time that grade 7 was doing Rube Goldberg, last year or the year before, the grade 7s went down to the grade 2 room and helped them out with it to kind of see the progression. And then the grade 2 kids came and watched the Rube Goldberg idea. One of the things, and I'm, I think, a little bit in a different place with this, is I love the hands-on aspect of the design thinking, and I also think that sometimes it's just intrinsically a whole bunch of fun. And so there's a lot of design thinking that we do that's really connected to the empathy and connected to looking outwards. Rube Goldberg doesn't have any of that. It's just, here's a challenge, see if you can do it, develop some persistence, work on it all day, and there's no pretense that it has any direct connection to what happens in the greater world, although I think a lot of the skills that kids take from that are then applied in a different way. So that's that, and we are now going to press play.
Yes, ma'am.
So just a couple of things that you can see there. Their task is really simple. Their task is to raise a flag. They have all day to do it. We used to run it on a project day. And I think the other thing that this type of activity really brings out is the diversity of using the tools at hand. So you can see that normally we use our ruler to measure, but in a task like this, they're thinking of all the different ways that they could repurpose materials. That's all I got to say.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about something we did in grade 6 last year. Sorry, Kat. That was really fun. Oh, sorry, I forgot my stick. So in grade 6, we have done some design projects over the years that involved using that design cycle. And then last May and June, John Malloy and I were teaching grade 6 science together. We tried to do something called Genius Hour. And it's a program that was developed in the States, but it's heavily influenced by the D school cycle, including that empathy component. So kids seemed a bit more engaged than they have in other design projects we've done because it was so personalized. So I tried to just select a few of the questions that kids chose last year. The kid that made gloves that shoot real fire actually worked. It was really fun watching them
take an interest in something so personal? So you can see there was a huge range, and this is just a few out of the 75 different projects we had. We have this guy, one of the Kasky boys last year, they've since left the school, but he designed his own cricket bat. Lots of interest in that because that was really a big passion for him, playing cricket. Lara was really interested in green technologies, and you can't see her full project, but she did a really nice experiment comparing traditional phone charging to one that used light energy as well. It was very well done. And then we're in their upper school. Anyway, it's something that we have embraced in the middle school, especially through the science classes, but the design cycle is really part of all our classes. There's opportunities to use it in every subject area. Sorry, I went fast.
Thank you. Can we give a big round of applause for these amazing teachers? They're wonderful. We're so lucky. And we were going to talk about upper school. Derek Druce was supposed to be here as he does Group 4 IB work, and they do a whole design project that he was going to talk about, as well as Mike, the tech coach in the upper school. They're both heavily right now involved in the robotics tournament.
If I can just say one thing about the upper school, just remember I don't need that. One of the things the upper school does, actually these were made with a 3D printer at the school. That wasn't done by the upper school, but they have a project that Mr. Druce leads where they actually have to come up with a design problem, and they have to create something, a tool, and they have to draw it, they have to design it, they have to figure out the measurements and so on, and then they have to print it. Or print the pieces and put it together and see if it works. And one group of two students actually came up with a design. We have a problem with the, I don't know if you ever noticed with Macs, the little adapter that they always come out of the VGA connection, and they created a clip that holds the two pieces together. And they actually decided to form a company, and I believe they sold a bunch of them as well. So very entrepreneurial, but that's just one example from the upper school.
So we're going to, before we head down to the robotics tournament, we're going to just have Jay do her usual book talk. But if you have not looked at the video, please do. It's a very empowering, it's very powerful. It's about robotics, but much more about contributing to the world, finding a need, meeting somebody's need. If you have not seen it, please take time to look at it, because I think it's really captures everything we've been talking about here today. So I'll pass it to Jay, and then we're going to all walk down to the robotics tournament.
I pulled a lot of books this time. I've got a few that are just kind of parent-focused that are new that I thought you might enjoy. This book I love. I ordered it. I don't even remember why I was caught up by it, but it's called Pokes Basics. It's just tips and tricks for all things technology. If you just had it by your bedside, it just tells you how to do everything. You're like, oh, this is so frustrating. It makes shortcuts and easy ways to deal with your phone, your computer, all sorts of technology. These two books are new for parents. They're 30 Days of Sex Talks. One's for ages 3 to 7 and one's for ages 8 to 11. They're appropriate ways to talk about things that may come up with young children. The Grief Recovery Handbook for Pet Loss. This may be something that's useful if pet loss has happened in your family. This one I brought for parents just because it looks like fun. The Soup Club, getting a group of people together and making wonderful soups together. The rest of what's up here are things to do with kids that are very hands-on and problem-solving type things that you might not know the library has. So we have some things that are games and activities. We have some wonderful cookbooks. I like this one, 52 New Food Challenges to help you and your kids try new foods. There's all sorts of crafting books, knitting, felting, jewelry, making science projects with recycled goods at home. The Daring book for girls and for boys has all sorts of like things you remember from childhood. What do kids do? They go out and play and learn and do fun things. And so all of these books are up here. I'm not going to kind of take them away. I'll leave them up this morning. Come look through them. Take anything that appeals to you to take home and do with kids. Thanks.
So we really hope you'll join us. We've told the coaches, and the kids have been told that there are going to be some parents around, and you can actually talk to them, ask them about their design process, their design thinking through this whole process of making their robots for this competition. Okay, so we're going to head out here and then go left, and down into the Landau Theater. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.